a swinging station in Buffalo, the big WUFO.
And once again, I'd like to welcome everybody back once again for another episode of the Buffalo History Channel, striving to bring you some of the best content on Buffalo's history. We're back into the media again, another episode of Legends of Buffalo Radio. It is my pleasure to be joined by one of the many legends of Buffalo Radio. I heard this man's name mentioned many times when I was working back when a few years back. I won't completely say back in the day, but when I was at the time I was working at WUFO and we were putting together our 45th anniversary, I heard his was one of the names that I heard mentioned. It is my pleasure to welcome to the Buffalo History Channel, the legendary Danny Harris. Danny, welcome to the channel.
Thank you for having me. I like what you're doing too, Doug.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was telling you off camera, one of the inspirations for this segment of Legends of Buffalo Radio, it's a spinoff from what we do on the Soul of Buffalo TV. And I just started remembering when I was working at WUFO, they used to tell, Dwayne Cumberlander and everybody used to tell all kinds of stories about all the DJs and jocks that used to be at WUFO throughout the years. And I figured this would be a great opportunity to do a segment like this and reach out to some of those legends and have them come on and tell their Buffalo Black media stories. So that's the inspiration. So as we talk to you, Danny, I always have everybody start us from the very beginning. When did it start for you? When did you know that you wanted to be in radio?
Wow. Man, it goes all the way back to a James Brown concert, actually.
I see the picture. I see the picture in the background.
Yeah, I mean, I got a whooping for sneaking into War Memorial Stadium to go see James Brown, and I got home after my father got off second shift at the Chevy plant. So that was like midnight. I'm like not quite 12 years old.
Oh, you was young when you got that, huh? When you got that work, huh?
Yeah. So I was hooked, and I mean, it was music in our house all the time, in our neighborhood all the time. I know you did a segment, and I really don't remember talking to Don Robinson about this, but we lived in the same house, and he had the address right.
Yeah.
But,
Edna Place.
On Edna Place, man, and Edna Place went right up to Maston Park, right to the rock pile, the old War Memorial Stadium. And so if that neighborhood, man, you heard music all the time on the street. When you went down on Jefferson, Audrey and Dell's would have the speaker outside playing on Jefferson Avenue, and you heard all the new music and everything. And so I was just into music, really, to me, it seems all my life. And so how I really got into radio, and it's you look back at the times. I remember my junior year at Kensington High School.
Okay.
I went to my guidance counselor to talk about different courses that I could take for college. This man discouraged me so much, man. He said, why do you want to go to college? You should go and work at Bethlehem Steel and this and that. And I said, well, I want to go to college. I want to have a trade. I want to do something professionally. And so after I graduated, Al Smith, have you heard of Al Smith? Al Smith.
Name is familiar.
Yeah, Al Smith used to do news at WBLK.
Okay.
Well, Al Smith and my oldest brother, they were best friends. He lived on Dodge Street. Well, he was at a school called Advanced Training Center.
Okay.
And he was doing it for radio and TV broadcasting.
Laura Dean talked about that school.
And so I found out about it, and that's where I went. I went there and studied broadcasting and radio and TV broadcasting, and then went on to UB. I started working at the station there, BFO. I worked there a few Sunday nights they did jazz there. And after that, man, I started sending tapes to WUFO, and it's really funny, Doug, because WUFO was so aggressive back then. I had never sent a tape or resume to BLK. I just wanted to work at UFO.
Wow.
And so actually how I got in, this is really strange because I know you talked before about how people, all these jocks back then were connected in some kind of way.
Right.
And man, you would not believe. I mean, Kelly Carson lived around the corner from me when we were out living on Cornwall. Kelly Carson lived around the corner on Cambridge. And
I lived incidentally, I lived on Northumberland. I know that's further ahead in time.
You were a block over.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
And so anyway, I had two older brothers, and one of my brothers had they called them component sets back then.
Yeah.
He had with the record player on top, and he had an 8-track in the center. And I realized that it could record, and it had a outlet for a microphone. And so I started just making tapes on 8-track, and my older brother, would ride around with him in his car. Well, one day somebody ran into his car. It was parked on the street, and they left a note. It was in the middle of the night, but they were nice enough to leave a note and say, "Hey, I hit your car. Here's my number. Can you get with me and I'll repair it?" So my brother went and picked the guy up. He lived down the street from us. He picked the guy up, and they drove to the auto place, wherever they went to get an estimate. And my brother always had the 8-track in his car. And he said, "Who's that?" He said, "Well, that's my little brother." He said, "Have him come see me." He said, "I'm the program director at WUFO." Now, this guy lived maybe 2 doors down across the street from me. And his name's Harold Lewis. And so I went by to see him, and I talked with him. And he said, "Hey, look," he said, "I want to get you over here, and I want to start you out doing news." And so that's how I started at UFO. I started doing news.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. So coming into WUFO, everybody has stories about what it was like to work at WUFO. Who were some of the people that you worked with when you were there? Who taught you the most at WUFO?
When I got there, of course, everybody talks about Don Mullins. I mean,
yes,
Don Mullins was the man, and he was the greatest, and he was always with me. He was always straightforward. He would call everybody Mr. "Well, Mr. Harris, I don't think that's quite ready yet. Going back to the drawing board. Keep on working. You'll get there." But when I got there, Byron Pitts was part-time. David Wilson, who's David Michaels, David was working mornings. Robert Mouzon was working there, and then Doug Blakely replaced him. So Doug was working middays, and Harold Lewis was working afternoons. And so those were the guys I started out with. And then later, while I was doing news, Keith Pollard, Disco Ties, he came along. We went to high school together. He was a year behind me. And also, I'll tell you who else went to high school with us. David Stafford, who worked over at WBLK. He wound up going down to Jackson, Mississippi, and did well. And he's actually here in Dallas now. He has a church. And so those were some of the people that started out with. And then Bobby Wonder came along. Lynn Hayes came along. Mark Van Superman came along. he was annoying at times.
See, he didn't talk about that in this interview.
That was my boy, and all of us were like the same age as Mr. Mullins' kids. So we were all like a big, huge family, man.
Yeah. Whenever I hear these stories about WUFO, I mean, and I'm gonna go back to Dwayne. I'm gonna have you talk about Dwayne too. The one thing that always stuck out to me, because I got my start in radio at WBLK, so I guess it was kind of an opposite direction for me. But one thing I've discovered about WUFO, and one thing I learned about is that back in the day, I think with radio, I think that was with radio in general back then, that there was really a standard of performance. You really had to come with your A game. You had to be on point, or otherwise they pulled you out of that studio.
You did. I mean, it really did, man. You really had to work at your craft, and other guys that were there or who were there before you, they didn't mind helping you. Like my mentor was Warren Epps, and Warren Epps, God rest his soul. I mean, we turned out to be great friends. As a matter of fact, my youngest daughter is his goddaughter. But this man, he really taught me radio. He taught me radio. He taught me about delivery, about how not to step on one artist with another one. I mean, and back then you really had to. Nothing was digital. Nothing was digital. Everything was on the turntable. So if you had to hit a post on a record, you had to know that song. And so we studied those songs. We studied the intros of the songs, the commercials. The commercials were commercials. We put a lot of time into the commercials.
Yeah, you had to with those tapes and the splicing.
Splicing, and I mean, nothing was digital. And so it was a thing where, when you got into radio, a person back then, when they got into radio, they really wanted to get into radio. First of all, you had to take, I'm sure you heard about the Class 3 operator's license.
Yes.
We had to have a license to go on the air because, well, we wasn't union, in New York and Los Angeles, those stations were union, so they had people running their boards for them. All they did was sit behind a microphone. But we couldn't touch that equipment unless we had that third-class operator's license. And it consisted of three parts. It was element 1, element 2, which were basically like a driving test, a written test for your driver's license. But element 9, that was the one that was hard. That's how you got your endorsement. And a lot of times it took them a long time to get it because Buffalo was the place in the region. The federal office in Buffalo was a regional office. So people would have to come from Pittsburgh, they would have to come from Cleveland and different places around to take that test. If you failed it, you had to wait 6 months before you could take it again.
Yep, I remember that.
So you really, when you got into radio back then, you really wanted to get in there. You made sure that you learned what you needed to learn about reading the transmitter settings and this and that, because we used to have to do all of that stuff.
And a lot of times people tend not to realize it ain't just about, talking on the mic and getting out there and meeting the ladies and everything. There's things like the commercials, and there's things like knowing what's going on with the transmitter. And even even when I go back to when I was in college, I only took like 2 radio courses because I really wasn't that interested in it at the time, even though I had instructors tell me that I need to get into it because they basically liked my voice. But I'll never forget, I talked about the splicing of the commercials and stuff. They had us do that as an exercise. And it's like the tape said good morning, and you had to put the good morning together. Nobody got that right in class but me, and it was real smooth and I didn't think nothing of it, but I mean, they looked at me like, thank you. Good job. You definitely got a career in this. I'm like, I was in the television. So So it took a while for me to get the radio, but that always sticks out to me. So whenever I hear those stories, and I can remember hearing about the lights, how people had to go on that building on Delaware Avenue.
Yeah.
I forgot what floor they was on, but you had to go get that license.
I can't remember, but it was, I went in there and
Yeah.
I got it the first time. There's a
Mhm.
few times people that would have to go back. I think Byron and Keith both had to go back a couple of times.
Now that's surprising to hear that about Byron, because I heard everybody kept saying Byron wasn't no joke with that back in the WUFO days.
Well, he wasn't. Byron was no joke. Byron was no joke, and we became, well, all of us were really close. But me and Byron, we became really close. It's funny how we got our full-time jobs at the same time, the exact same time.
Yeah.
We were, because Byron was, they finally, I was doing news, and they finally let me go on the air. And so my big thing was, okay, Juneteenth. You know how big Juneteenth is?
Yeah. Okay. On
And
Jefferson?
on Jefferson, when
Yeah.
on Jefferson, when there was about 250,000 people down there that whole
Yeah.
weekend.
Yep.
And other people don't know that was the biggest, I don't know if it still is, but the biggest Juneteenth festival in the country.
About
And
third
so,
largest at this point.
yeah, at this point they are. Okay,
Yeah.
but back then, that was the one.
Mhm.
And so they sent everybody down there to broadcast. And so I was the one that had to stay back at the radio station to run the board and then go down to them when they were going to do their breaks. And so Byron told me, this is how Byron talked, yo, man, you got that shot, man. He said, do your thing, man. He said, just bring it down to us, when you get ready. And man, I went on there, man, and I was jockeying, man. And I was like, I said, I'm gonna get this in. And so Byron was talking to me down the line, and he said, hey man, he said, you're doing good. He said, Mr. Mullins said, Mr. Harris kicking ass down there, huh? Like that. And so I started getting more airtime when I need to fill in for somebody. I would come in, and the way me and Byron went full time, we were at the radio station picking up some checks. I think my check was about $20. His maybe was about $35. And we were sitting in the front office trying to figure out where we're gonna spend this money for lunch. Well, what happened was the day before, I'm hanging out with David Mike. We were hanging out, and we come back to the radio station, and Harold Lewis was just getting off the air. Michael Copeland, and I know you heard of Michael Copeland.
Michelangelo Copeland, absolutely.
Michelangelo Copeland, our boy. Well, he would come in and he would do his commercial. So he needed somebody to go into the production room to help him with the commercial. So Harold got off the air. Byron was going on the air because it was summer hours. So Byron was part-time, summer hours. And so David and Harold Lewis never got along. I mean, they never got along. And so David just simply said, hey man, why don't you go on and take them back there and do the commercial? Because Harold wasn't going to do it. And Harold blew up. I mean, they were going at each other, and Byron and Michael Copeland, they were trying to pull them apart. Well, one of the things with Sheridan Broadcast, two people got into a fight,
Mm-hmm.
they both got let go, no matter who was wrong. And so Don Mullins, the next day had David and Harold in the office, and he knew that David had accepted this job at our sister station, IOD, in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
So, he knew that David was going to be all right. Well, David had turned the job down and didn't tell anybody. And so Mullins was in the office with him, and me and Byron, we were sitting out in the front office. And David was trying to get out of the office to call to call into the office to tell them, hey, I didn't take that job. And mother's playing it off, sit down like that. And so anyway, after they both got fired, he came out, and first two people he saw was me and Byron. And he said, Byron, he said, no, he said, Mr. Pitts, he said, you the new program director. He said, Mr. Harris, have your ass on the air tomorrow afternoon. And that's how I got full time.
I knew about that story. I'm sitting here smiling and laughing because I knew about that story. I think I just let you tell it. I heard about that back in 2007. I'm like, okay, I remember I heard about this.
You know it was the truth.
Yeah. And I got that from the one and only Dwayne himself. So while we on the subject of him, because I always bring him up, what can you tell me about Dwayne Landers? We all know him as Dwayne Landers on the air.
Yeah, Dwayne Cumberlander. That's off the air. That's off the air. Dwayne was really cool, man. I mean, he came in, he was just one of those likable kids. He was in high school. He come in and would ask questions all the time. I mean, he would hang out in the studio and he was just, studying. He was one of the interns, and also I tell you who else. And Dwayne had to remind me that Ruben Santiago,
yes,
the guy, he was one
Lackawanna
of the
Blues.
Yeah, Lackawanna Blues. He was one of the interns that I had totally forgot. But yeah, but Dwayne was really cool, man. He would when we would have extra gigs, as far as gigs outside of the radio station spinning records, if we were too booked, we would give Dwayne some of the gigs. And so he was really coming up learning inside of the radio station and outside on what you can do as far as making money in the streets, as we would say. Because man, I tell you, it was like if I wasn't in Niagara Falls, Brockport, or Toronto, because I was spinning records. I mean, my one of my friends was the head of the Black Student Union at Brockport. Another one was head of the Black Student Union at Niagara University. And so we would always go up to Toronto all the time because they loved us. We would go up to Toronto and never have to touch a record. All they did was hand us a microphone, and the DJs up there would spin the records for us. And that was when, WUFO's signal went up into Toronto. So people listened to
it. Okay. Any other stories? Like, I know we talked about Juneteenth or back in the day. Were there any other promotions that y'all did? I know Laura Dean talked when I had her on. She talked about the little dating game that Byron came up with at the Continental. She told me about that one. Were there anything else they came up?
Did she tell you everything?
I'm not sure if she said everything, but I know she told me about her date.
She picked the worst dates, man. That was
I guess so.
We did two of them. The first one, man, she was this guy was working and he didn't sleep for like 2 days. Yeah. And so by the time we had the dinner and the dance and all of that stuff like that, I mean, this man was out of it. I felt bad for him, but he was acting crazy. Yeah. Then the second one, I mean, this guy had these platform shoes on, and he was like, they were calling her Lady Love. Lady Love.
Lady Love, yep.
Yeah. And he fell down the stairs at the Continental.
And them platform shoes, I guess he probably did.
Yeah. Yeah. So we used to do that in the high school grade average contest, something that Byron thought up. And, we would get these kids, they would send their report cards in, and the winner, the person that at the end of the contest, the person that had the best grade average, they would win tickets to every concert for a year that we had. Of course, all of the WUFO paraphernalia and music for an entire year. All the hits that we had for an entire year. Yeah. So yeah, we did that. There's a few other ones that I can't think of off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
right. I mean, one thing that I've learned in research, you know, WUFO was really good at, and even Don Mullins talked about this in his interview, that on Afro Central, that they were really good at, you know, being a mentoring program for young people, because many of the kids that came on, people that came on the air were practically out of high school. So they were
Yeah.
bringing young people in and giving them opportunities to work, and for some of it might have been their first jobs. WUFO was really good for that.
And you know, the good thing about it, Doug, is that I think why UFO was so successful for all the years because they hired people that were from Buffalo.
Right.
You know, you grew up. I grew up in Cold Spring. After that, I lived over in the Delavan White area. I knew Buffalo in and out. I used to walk Buffalo, you know, and I knew the music that that touched people because I grew up listening to it. And I think that was really the success of WUFO. I mean, because one of the things you got to think about too, people were wondering why Buffalo, I mean, not Buffalo, UFO being an AM station, that it was, I mean, we were hurting BLK. And the thing about it is, BLK, I can't remember what year, but
Mhm.
BLK was not stereo. FM stereo didn't come along until later. So
Right.
we were on even killed.
Okay. So after what, how long were you at WUFO until?
I left 1 4 in 79. And I
79.
went up to
Okay.
Rochester. Yeah.
Okay. So where else did, so where after, so let's go after WUFO. So you landed in Rochester.
Yeah, I landed in Rochester. Then me and Byron got back together in Denver.
Okay.
And from Denver, I went to put on a radio station in Kansas City. And after that, as was a matter of fact, because I only stayed there for one book and then bought Bobby Wonder in.
Mhm.
Bobby was down in Georgia. He was somewhere in Georgia out of work. And Byron called me and told me that Bobby needs a job. So I got him the job and I went to the record industry after that. Started working at Polygram Records, Island
Okay.
Black Music.
Okay, so what was that? What was making that transition like, going from working at a radio station to going to working at a record company?
Well, it was I knew how they operated because a lot of the record reps that worked us, they were real good people. And you just kind of, you know, they were a little older, and you just kind of saw how they worked, and you knew how they worked you. But how I got that job, it was when I was in Denver. It was it's a guy named Ron Ellison. As a matter of fact, he has a book out now. His name Ron Ellison, and me and this guy had become friends just over the phone. He was an independent record promoter, and we had become just friends over the phone. I met that guy one time, and we had became friends. I was out at a conference out in Los Angeles, and that's where I met him. But me and this guy would talk like just about every week, and I went to Kansas City, and he started calling me. And I told him, I said, hey man, I said, I just started the job. He said, well, I want you to, first he wanted me to come to Cleveland. And I said, man, I said, I can't, you know, I said, I just started this job. I said, I got to put this radio station on the air. I said, it's dark right now. And he said, well, he said, I tell you what, he said, you put the radio station on the air. And he said, yeah, you would have done your job. And he said, I'll come back and get you. So he called me about 3 months later, and he said, "Hey man," he said, "You ready to come work for me?" And I said, "Okay." He said, "But it's not Cleveland." I'm thinking I'm getting closer to Buffalo. He said, "I want to send you down to Dallas." I said, "Man, I've never been to Dallas in my life."
Hmm.
I said, "I haven't worked records." He said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "I'm going to send you down there." He said, "I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about the record industry." He said, "Man," he said, "you were good to me when I was working independent records and I wasn't making that much money. And you basically helped me feed my family by helping me out with the music." Well, he started worked at Warner Brothers, then he worked at Polygram. And so that's where he hired me. He hired me at Polygram. My second time meeting this man was when he flew me out to Los Angeles to hire me. And that's how I started in the record industry down here in Dallas.
All right. And you still with the record industry?
No, not with the record industry. No,
Okay.
uh, I went to Atlantic for a little while,
Okay.
Atlantic Records for a little while, and man, I was like, oh man, Atlantic Records, they built their catalog on
Hmm.
jazz and R&B, and when
Right.
I went over there, man, it was hip hop, and nothing against hip hop, but I
Hmm.
was dealing with some of the hard ones, man, that was
Yeah.
ducking bullets and all of that.
The gangster rap era, huh?
Yeah, I said, man, I can't do this, you know.
Yeah.
So um, when they decided to merge Atlantic and Electra, they decided to merge. I told the young lady that was working for Electra, I said, hey, look, no hard feelings, but you can have it. I didn't know what I was gonna do. I really didn't. So I wound up actually working part time at the station where Laura Dean is at, Lynn Hayes is at now. KRMB. I was working part time, and so then I started doing a little contract work because Reach Media, company that Tom Joyner owned, they were moving out of the ABC building into their own building, and so I was doing some contract work helping them to put their music together digitally. And so you heard of Roger Moore, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Roger was down
Rockin'
here.
Roger Moore. Yep.
Yeah, Roger was down here, and he called me. It goes back to James Brown. He
Yep.
called me. He called me one time when I was over at the radio station KRMB. Now, mind you, that Tom is not on service broadcast, and so
Mhm.
I was like double dipping. But
Right.
anyway, he called me and told me on Christmas Day. He said, "Hey man," he said, "James Brown died." He said,
Mhm.
"Can you put together a tribute for him?" I said, yeah, I'll put together a tribute. And so I put together a tribute. And Tom, the show back then, the show, when the holidays would come, Tom wouldn't have anybody filling in. They would just put in all the best of stuff. So Tom just happened to hear the James Brown tribute. Tom loved James Brown.
Mhm.
And the girl that was the executive producer, she said, "You did that?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "How long did it take you?" I said, "It took me about an hour." She said, "Well, you need to be on our production team," like that. And she had me talk to Mitch Faulkner, late Mitch Faulkner, great
Okay.
dude. And that's how I got on at Reach Media. And I'm still there. I'm the production director there. Been there for now, was it 16 years?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now I know you did when I was working at WUFO, you did a show called Soul Across America because we
So,
used to play it over the air.
yeah. Sold Across America. Yeah. It was on there and it was on 1400 at separate times, of course. But yeah, it's man, I tell you, Doug, it's just me, man. I love that old school music.
Yeah.
I love it. I think I think that we grew up, or I'm a little older than you, but during that time, man, 60s and the 70s, that music, man, it will never come back like that. It will
Right.
never come back.
Unfortunately.
And I mean, you can listen. That's why, like here, I have my jukebox.
Yeah, see,
You know, and I got all those 45s in there. I mean, they're real 45s, not digital.
yeah.
I got all those
Did
45s.
you get any of them from WUFO?
Yes, well, it's a few albums that I did get when I left. But yeah, man. But right now I have a radio station, online radio station,
Mhm.
called Baby Boomers R&B.
Okay.
So if you get a chance, just check it out. Just pull it
Yeah.
up. It's called Baby Boomers R&B.
Okay. All right. So is there anything else? Well, before I get to that part, I'm sure you've watched, kept your eye on Buffalo, and you've seen how WUFO has progressed over the years into
Yeah.
today with moving to the Michigan corridor, finally going to FM, becoming Power 96.5. They even have their own museum inside their building. What are you, under the leadership of Sheila L. Brown? Got to give a shout out to Sheila Brown. What's your views on WUFO today and how it's progressing?
Well, I am so happy for Sheila, and I was definitely going to give her a shout out before we finish this, because I
Yeah.
don't know if you can see this.
Yes. Power
Okay.
96.5. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. I ran into Sheila and her husband Kenny on the Tom Joyner cruise
Okay.
back in May,
Yeah.
and she comes on every year, and me, her, and Kenny, we sit down and we chop it up. We talk about Buffalo, and when I
Mhm.
ran into her this time, she said, "Danny, I have something for you." And she said, "You sit right here. I'll be right back." She came and she brought me this T-shirt, man.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
doing an excellent job down there. Definitely
yeah.
keeping that legacy going.
And she surprised me. I didn't know that she was. They have IGO down in Georgia also.
Mhm.
She
Yeah,
have them.
WIGO. Oh my goodness, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So
her daughter's at the home of that now.
oh, really?
Yes, Morgan. Yep.
Oh, wow. That is great, man. Yeah. But it was. You look back, man. With all of the people that came through there, how we were all connected. I tell you about how Al Smith and my brother, they were friends when they were like in elementary school. So I've known Al since I was like in first grade.
Mhm.
Roosevelt Tucker, I don't know if you ever heard of Roosevelt Tucker. He
Mhm.
used to be on BLK.
Mhm.
Well, me and his brothers, we all hung out together. Um, you have Jerry Youngblood. Jerry's Jerry's sister was married to my cousin. So it's all just connected. Ron Atkins and I, we played little
Yes.
league football against each other.
Mhm.
It's just everybody's connected, and it was never. Of course, we were rivals,
Yeah.
but it was never any of that harsh stuff like sabotage or anything
Right.
like that. Man, we just all did our thing. We got along, and it's funny. It's funny. It's a story because we 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 went off in the evening. UFO went off in the evening, and so we were trying to figure out how can we get that audience to tune back in the morning when Byron came on. Well, what we would do, Al Parker and Bobby Love, they were over at WNIA. I don't know if you remember that station,
Mhm.
WNIA over there. I believe it's on Genesee Street, going
Okay.
towards the airport. Yeah. Well, they were working there in the evenings. And so when we would get off the air, they would come on. And man, we would be on the air all day talking about Al Parker, just dogging him out. And so people would tune in to Al Parker to see what he's going to say about us. And him and Bobby Love, the Tenderoni King. And
Mhm.
so we would do that. And so when they turn their radios off at night after they're finished with them, they would turn it back on to UFO in the morning, see what Byron is going to say.
Mhm.
So that was how we kept some numbers up for a while
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's certainly been a pleasure to have had you a part of the Buffalo History Channel. I've been intending to make my way over to you. The long list of people that I'm still in the process of trying to get on here. But
Yes,
you
a
were
long
definitely on the list.
amen, and get them because a lot of them are gone now, Doug.
Yes, yes. I mean, that was what we ran into when we were planning. I remember when we were planning the 45th anniversary. We were trying to reach out to all the personalities to get them to come back. And then we discovered that so many of them had passed on, you know.
Yeah, yeah. But some great talent came through those doors, man. We called it a school, and that's exactly
Absolutely.
what it was.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Danny, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Buffalo History Channel.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, brother.